My best friend's widow fell in love with me. Is this betrayal or fate? What would you do if the person you've loved in secret for years suddenly became available, but only because your best friend, the man who trusted you with everything, was gone forever? I'm standing at a crossroads where loyalty to the dead collides with the possibility of love with the living, and I honestly don't know if I'm about to make the biggest mistake of my life or finally step into the happiness I've denied myself for so long. My best friend's widow told me she loves me, and now I'm torn between honoring his memory and embracing a future I never thought possible. This isn't just a story about love, it's about guilt, grief, and the question that keeps me awake at night. Am I betraying my best friend, or is this somehow what he would have wanted? Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and moving forward. My name is David, and 3 years ago I lost my best friend Marcus in a car accident that shattered all our lives in ways I'm still trying to understand. Marcus wasn't just my best friend, he was my brother in every way that mattered. The guy who knew all my secrets, who stood by me through my darkest days, and who trusted me completely. His wife, Sarah, has been part of my life for almost a decade, ever since Marcus introduced us at that college party where I immediately understood why he'd fallen so hard for her. For years, I watched their relationship from the sidelines, supporting them through arguments and celebrations, always keeping my own complicated feelings carefully locked away where no one could see them. What I'm about to tell you has been eating at me for months now, and I need to get it out because the weight of this secret is crushing me. Marcus and I met in high school, two awkward teenagers who bonded over video games and terrible jokes that no one else found funny. We went to the same college, moved to the same city after graduation, and built our adult lives practically side by side like we'd planned it all along. He was the confident one, the guy who could walk into any room and make friends instantly, while I was quieter, more reserved, the one who observed from the edges. When he met Sarah during our junior year, I remember him calling me at 2 in the morning, practically shouting into the phone that he'd just met the woman he was going to marry. I laughed at him then, told him he was crazy after one date, but he was right, because 2 years later, I was his best man at their wedding. Those years watching them together were beautiful and painful in ways I could never admit to anyone, not even to myself most days. Here's the part I've never told anyone, the secret that's been rotting inside me for almost 10 years now. I had feelings for Sarah before Marcus ever met her, feelings I never acted on because I was too scared, too uncertain, too convinced she was out of my league. We'd met briefly at a campus event 2 weeks before that party where Marcus saw her, and I'd spent those 2 weeks trying to work up the courage to ask her out. I was planning my approach, rehearsing what I'd say, imagining different scenarios like some lovesick fool in a romantic comedy. Then, Marcus met her at that party I couldn't attend because of a family emergency, and by the time I got back to campus, they were already inseparable. What was I supposed to do? Tell my best friend that I'd seen her first, that I had some kind of claim to her, like she was a prize to be won? I made a choice that night when Marcus called me, gushing about this incredible woman he'd just met. I chose my friendship over my feelings, decided that my happiness wasn't worth risking the most important relationship in my life. It seemed noble at the time, like I was being a good friend, sacrificing my own desires for his happiness. Over the years, I convinced myself those feelings weren't real, that they were just infatuation, that I'd built Sarah up in my head into something she wasn't. I dated other people, had a few relationships that never quite worked out for reasons I couldn't fully explain to myself or my partners. But if I'm being honest, really honest, a part of me never fully let go of that initial spark I felt when I first talked to Sarah. Watching Marcus and Sarah build their life together was both wonderful and torturous in ways I couldn't admit even to myself. I was genuinely happy for them, celebrating when they got engaged, crying actual tears of joy at their wedding, supporting them through Marcus's job loss and Sarah's miscarriage. But there were moments, brief flashes, where I'd catch myself watching Sarah laugh at one of Marcus's jokes and feeling something twist inside my chest. I'd imagined what it would be like if things had been different, if I'd been braver, if timing had worked out another way. Then I'd feel disgusted with myself for even thinking such thoughts about my best friend's wife, and I'd bury those feelings deeper, pile more guilt on top of them until I could barely breathe. The night Marcus died, I was supposed to be in the car with him, a detail that still haunts me every single day. We'd planned to grab dinner and catch a late movie, our usual Thursday night tradition that we'd maintained for years. But I canceled last minute because of a work deadline, telling him we'd reschedule for the weekend, never imagining those would be the last words I'd ever say to him. Marcus decided to go anyway, stopping by the grocery store to pick up ingredients for the dinner Sarah had mentioned wanting to cook that weekend. A drunk driver ran a red light at 60 miles an hour and Marcus never stood a chance. The police showed up at my apartment at 11:30 that night, and I knew before they said anything that something terrible had happened. They asked if I knew Marcus Chen, if I was the emergency contact listed in his phone, and suddenly my legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. I don't remember much about that night except the feeling that reality had cracked open and I'd fallen through into some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I had to be the one to tell Sarah because the police couldn't reach her. She'd been in the shower and missed their calls. Driving to their house, practicing in my head how to tell her that her husband was gone, was the longest 20 minutes of my entire life. Sarah opened the door smiling, expecting Marcus, and I watched that smile die as she registered my expression and the police car in her driveway. I caught her when her knees buckled, held her while she screamed, stayed with her through that entire horrible night as the reality slowly sank in. In the days and weeks that followed, I became her support system in ways that felt both necessary and complicated. I handled the funeral arrangements, dealt with insurance companies, helped her sort through Marcus's belongings when she couldn't face doing it alone. I was there because Marcus would have done the same for me, because Sarah needed someone, because leaving her alone felt impossible. But I was also there because some broken part of me needed to be close to her, even in grief, maybe especially in grief. We cried together, shared memories of Marcus, held each other through panic attacks and sleepless nights. I moved into their guest room for 3 months because Sarah couldn't stand being alone in the house, and I couldn't stand the thought of her suffering by herself. Those months were strange, existing in this bubble of shared grief where normal rules didn't seem to apply. We'd stay up until 4 in the morning talking about Marcus, or we'd sit in complete silence for hours, just existing in the same space because being alone felt unbearable for both of us. The shift happened so gradually that I didn't notice it at first. Small changes in how we related to each other that accumulated over months. Sarah started smiling again, real smiles, not the fake ones she'd wear for other people who didn't understand her grief. We developed our own routines. Cooking dinner together, watching shows Marcus would have hated, taking long walks where we'd talk about everything and nothing. I started noticing little things, how she'd touch my arm when she laughed, how she'd seek me out first when something good or bad happened. These moments felt dangerous, like we were walking a tightrope where one wrong step could send us both plummeting. About 18 months after Marcus died, Sarah and I were sorting through boxes in the garage, deciding what to keep and what to donate. We found Marcus's college jersey, and Sarah just broke down in a way she hadn't in months, sobbing so hard she couldn't catch her breath. I held her, and when she finally calmed down, she looked up at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. She said that she didn't know what she would have done without me, that I'd saved her life in those dark months when breathing felt impossible. Then she kissed me, just a brief touch of lips that lasted maybe 2 seconds before she pulled away, horrified. We both apologized frantically, blamed grief and exhaustion, agreed it was a mistake that couldn't happen again. Sarah asked me to leave, said she needed space to process, and I went home feeling like I'd betrayed Marcus in the worst possible way. We didn't talk for 3 weeks, the longest we'd gone without contact since the accident, and I felt like I was losing both of them all over again. But then Sarah called me at midnight, crying, saying she couldn't do this, couldn't pretend I wasn't important to her, couldn't keep pushing away the one person who truly understood what she'd lost. We met for coffee the next day, and she told me that she'd been having feelings for me for months, maybe longer. She said she felt guilty and confused, like she was betraying Marcus, but also that she couldn't keep denying what she felt. I sat there, frozen, because this was everything I'd wanted and everything I'd feared, all happening at once. I told her about my history, about meeting her first, about the feelings I'd buried for almost a decade. She cried, I cried, and we agreed that we needed time to figure out what this meant, whether these feelings were real or just grief wearing a disguise. The next few months were an emotional roller coaster that left both of us exhausted and confused about everything we thought we knew. We'd go on what felt like dates, then cancel plans out of guilt, feeling like we were doing something wrong. We'd hold hands, then pull away, remembering Marcus, wondering what he'd think if he could see us. I couldn't sleep, plagued by dreams where Marcus was alive and looking at me with betrayal in his eyes, asking me how I could do this to him. Sarah was struggling too. I could see it in her face, the way joy and guilt would war with each other every time we were together. My other friends started noticing that something was going on, asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Marcus's family was still very much in Sarah's life, and mine, and I couldn't imagine how they'd react if they knew. Would they see this as a betrayal? As me taking advantage of Sarah's grief? As some kind of long con to steal Marcus's life? The thought made me sick, but I also couldn't deny that being with Sarah felt right in ways nothing else ever had. When we were together, really together, without the guilt crashing in, I felt whole in a way I hadn't since Marcus died. Maybe in a way I'd never felt before. Sarah and I had countless conversations about Marcus, about what he would want for us, whether he'd approve or be angry. We remembered how he'd always joked that if anything happened to him, I should take care of Sarah, though he'd meant it as a joke, not a literal instruction. Sarah told me about conversations she'd had with Marcus, where he'd said that I was the best man he knew, the person he trusted most in the world. Those memories made everything harder, not easier, because they highlighted exactly what I stood to lose if I pursued this. Marcus's memory, his trust, the image of the friend I'd tried so hard to be. The revenge I felt wasn't against Marcus, it was against fate itself, against the drunk driver who'd stolen my best friend, against the universe for putting me in this impossible situation. I was angry at Marcus for dying, for leaving this mess behind, for making me choose between loyalty to him and happiness with Sarah. That anger felt like its own betrayal, being mad at a dead man for dying, for not being here to tell me what to do. I wanted revenge against the circumstances that made loving Sarah feel like a crime, against the guilt that poisoned every happy moment we tried to have together. The turning point came on what would have been Marcus's 33rd birthday, a day I'd been dreading for weeks. Sarah and I had planned to visit his grave together, like we had the year before, to share memories and feel close to him. We stood there in the cemetery, and Sarah started talking to Marcus's headstone like he could hear her, telling him about her life, about her confusion, about me. She told him that she thought she was falling in love with me, that she didn't know if that made her a terrible person or if somehow this was meant to be. She said she believed he'd brought us together, that maybe his last gift to both of us was each other. I'd never thought about it that way, as something Marcus might have wanted rather than something that betrayed him. But standing there, listening to Sarah pour her heart out to a piece of granite, I started to wonder if maybe we'd been punishing ourselves for nothing. Marcus had loved us both, had wanted us both to be happy, and maybe, just maybe, he would have understood this in a way we couldn't. I started talking too, telling Marcus about my guilt, about my fear that I was stealing his life, about how much I missed having him to talk to about exactly this kind of situation. It sounds crazy, but I swear I felt something shift in that moment, like a weightlifting, like permission being granted from somewhere beyond. Sarah and I went to dinner after, at Marcus's favorite restaurant, and we made a decision to stop fighting what we felt. We agreed that we'd move forward carefully, that we'd honor Marcus's memory while also allowing ourselves to be happy. It wasn't betrayal, we decided, it was survival. Two people who'd loved the same man, finding comfort and love with each other. We told Marcus's parents first, nervously, expecting anger or judgment, and his mother surprised us both by crying and hugging us. She said that Marcus would be happy we had each other, that he'd always wanted the people he loved to be taken care of, and that we shouldn't feel guilty for finding happiness again. Not everyone was supportive, of course. Some of Marcus's friends thought we'd moved too fast, implied things about our relationship before his death. We had to endure whispers and judgments, people who thought they knew our story better than we did. But Sarah and I were solid by then, committed to figuring this out together despite the complications. We started officially dating, stopped hiding what we were to each other, and slowly, painfully, began building something that was ours, not just a shadow of what Marcus had left behind. Building a relationship on the foundation of shared grief is complicated in ways I never could have imagined before living it. Sarah and I had to figure out how to be a couple, not just grieving friends who clung to each other in the darkness. We had our first real fight about something stupid, I don't even remember what, and both of us panicked because we'd never argued before. We had to learn each other's quirks and annoyances, the things that Marcus had known but that we'd never been in the right context to discover. I learned that Sarah is impossibly stubborn about the weirdest things, like how towels should be folded, and she learned that I absolutely cannot function before coffee in the morning. We had to navigate the weird parts too, like Sarah still wearing her wedding ring for the first year we dated, or the fact that Marcus's photos were still all over the house. I never asked her to take them down because he was part of our story, part of how we found each other, and erasing him would have been wrong. We talked about Marcus constantly in those early days, sharing memories, laughing at his jokes, keeping him alive between us. Some people found it morbid, but for us it was essential, making Marcus part of our relationship rather than a ghost haunting it. The physical part of our relationship was complicated by layers of guilt and grief that we had to work through together. Our first kiss after we decided to really try this felt momentous and terrifying, like we were crossing a line we could never uncross. Every step forward required conversation, consent, acknowledgement of what it meant to be intimate with each other when Marcus's memory was still so present. But there was also relief, finally allowing ourselves to feel what we'd been fighting, finally being honest about the connection that had been building for years. We moved in together after dating for 8 months, partly because it was practical, and partly because we'd already spent so much time living together during those grief-heavy months. Sarah sold the house she'd shared with Marcus, a decision that was painful but necessary, a way to create space for our relationship to exist on its own terms. We bought a new place together, picked out furniture, created a home that belonged to both of us, though we made sure to include things that honored Marcus, a photo on the mantle, his favorite books on the shelf. It was our way of saying that loving each other didn't mean forgetting him, that he could be part of our story without being the whole story. People keep asking me if this feels like some kind of revenge, if I'm somehow getting back at Marcus for having what I wanted, forgetting the girl I saw first. The answer is complicated because yes, there's a dark part of me that feels a twisted satisfaction in finally having what I wanted, in not being the sidekick anymore. But it's not revenge against Marcus. It's more like revenge against the version of myself who was too scared to take chances, who let fear dictate his choices for so long. This relationship with Sarah is me finally choosing bravery over safety, choosing to risk pain and judgment for the possibility of real happiness. If Marcus could see us now, I genuinely believe he'd be okay with it, maybe even happy that we found each other after he was gone. He loved us both, wanted us both to have full, happy lives, and I have to believe that includes this. The revenge, if there is any, is against the guilt that tried to keep us apart, against the social conventions that say there's a proper timeline for grief and moving on. Sarah and I refused to let other people's opinions dictate when and how we were allowed to be happy, and maybe that's its own form of revenge against a world that wanted us to suffer longer. I'm not stealing Marcus's life. I'm living my own life, a life that includes the woman I love and the memory of my best friend. There's no hooky involved, no playing games or skipping out on responsibilities to my own emotions or to Marcus's memory. We're doing this the hard way, the honest way, facing the guilt and the judgment head-on rather than sneaking around or pretending we don't feel what we feel. Every day, I choose to honor Marcus by being the best man I can be for Sarah, by treating her with the love and respect he would have wanted her to have, by being honest about my feelings rather than hiding in the shadows. So, here we are, 3 years after Marcus died and 18 months into a relationship that still feels both completely right and slightly impossible. Sarah and I are engaged now, planning a wedding that will honor both our love for each other and our love for Marcus. His parents will be there, celebrating with us, because they understand that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, that caring about Marcus and caring about each other aren't mutually exclusive. We're writing our own vows, and I'm going to talk about Marcus, about how he brought us together even in death, about how loving Sarah feels like honoring his memory rather than betraying it. The guilt hasn't completely disappeared, and I don't think it ever will entirely. There are still moments when I catch myself wondering if Marcus really would be okay with this, if I've crossed some invisible line that can't be uncrossed. But those moments are getting fewer and farther between, replaced by a growing sense of peace that what we have is real and good. Sarah and I have built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy, and that's not something to feel guilty about, it's something to celebrate. We're not betraying Marcus, we're honoring him by refusing to let his death be the end of happiness for everyone who loved him. To anyone out there facing a similar situation, wondering if it's okay to find love in unexpected places, my advice is this: listen to your heart, but also do the work. Sarah and I went to therapy, individually and together, processing our grief and guilt before diving into a relationship. We talked to Marcus's family, got their blessing, made sure we weren't just running from pain into each other's arms. We were honest with ourselves about our motivations, about whether we were seeking comfort or real love. The answer, we found, was both, and that's okay. Love born from grief is still love, and it's no less valid than love born from any other circumstance. My best friend's widow fell in love with me, and I fell in love with her, and we're building a life together that includes his memory without being defined by it. Is this betrayal or fate? I've stopped asking that question because it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we're happy, that we're honoring our truth, that we're moving forward rather than staying frozen in the past. Marcus gave us both so much during his life, and maybe his final gift was each other. Two people who understood his value because we'd both loved him completely. If you're still here, thank you for listening to my story, for not judging, for understanding that love is complicated and grief is messy, and sometimes the heart wants what it wants regardless of how much we try to logic our way out of it. Life is too short. Marcus taught me that, to deny yourself happiness because of fear or guilt or what other people might think. So I'm choosing happiness. Choosing Sarah, choosing to believe that somewhere Marcus is okay with that. I want to leave you with one final thought that's been guiding me through this entire journey. Loyalty to the dead doesn't mean suffering for the living, and honoring someone's memory doesn't require sacrificing your own happiness. Marcus lived his life fully, loved completely, and would want the same for everyone he cared about. Sarah and I aren't forgetting him by moving forward together. We're keeping him alive by embodying the values he stood for: love, loyalty, and the courage to be honest about what you feel. If you're facing an impossible choice between honoring the past and embracing the future, know that sometimes you can do both. That sometimes the path forward includes the person you lost rather than leaving them behind. Marcus is woven into every part of Sarah's and my relationship, in the way we communicate, in the values we share, in the love we have for each other that grew from the love we both had for him. That's not betrayal. That's transformation, taking tragedy and creating something beautiful from it. And if that's not honoring someone's memory, I don't know what is.